Millions of people die each year due to poverty. It's an evil that dims life and undermines the dignity of individuals. In this video, we'll take a tour of the most unfortunate countries in the world. Countries that reveal simply devastating statistics. The Poorest Countries in the World 2024. Number 10. Madagascar. Yes, this island is famous for its dancing lemurs and the movie starring a lion and his friends, but it's also famous for being one of the poorest countries in 2024. Did you expect that? Madagascar had a per capita GDP of just $526 per year, and it's projected that by the end of 2024, things will get even worse. That is $514 per year. It's like the economy is playing hide and seek and losing. Madagascar is a beautiful place where even the trees seem to come out of a Dr. Seuss story. But living on $1.46 a day doesn't sound very pleasant. Despite being the leading exporter of vanilla, the island is plunged into poverty, affecting over 80% of its population. What's happening here? Is vanilla not as profitable after all? The situation is more complicated than an haute cuisine recipe. Let's remember that here, most inhabitants depend on subsistence agriculture, struggling against outdated techniques and infrastructure that leaves much to be desired. And if you thought climate change was just a documentary topic, in Madagascar, it's a reality, with cyclones and famines, especially in the south. Add to that a low life expectancy and sanitation conditions that would make any public health expert cry. Over 70% of the population without access to adequate sanitation. Seriously, it's really concerning and sad. Madagascar is a vanilla paradise, but also an environment of poverty. An island of contrasts that teaches us that even the most exotic places have their own battles. Number 9. The Central African Republic. A country with a GDP per capita of only $521 annually. Where did all the money go, you may wonder? Because with an abundance of diamonds and gold, one might think it's swimming in wealth. But the reality is more complicated than an episode of Game of Thrones. Here, the elite seems to be playing Monopoly with natural resources, while most people barely survive. Speaking of survival, the security situation is so volatile that the UN has had to intervene with over 15,000 troops. Did someone say rescue operation? And let's not forget our Russian and Rwandan friends, providing that much-needed military support. Well, we know that here every external entity also wants its share of the mineral resources. Meanwhile, 70% of its inhabitants live in extreme poverty, meaning with less than $1.90 a day. Extreme minimalism, or simply a heartbreaking situation. If you thought education improves the scenario, I have bad news for you. It's shorter than a series canceled in its first season. Average schooling barely reaches 5 years for boys and even less for girls. The level of illiteracy is simply alarming. Number 8. Welcome to the economic roller coaster of the Republic of Zimbabwe. With a GDP per capita of $516 annually, this is definitely the land where money flies faster than a snap of fingers. Its currency depreciated by 647% in just 1 year. This is too much. If that's not an Olympic record in devaluation, I don't know what is. Can you imagine going to bed a millionaire and waking up searching for coins under the couch? Not even a horror movie scared me that much. It jumped by 101.5% in January 2023, and by June, it was already at 175.8%. To top it off, food and energy prices skyrocketed thanks to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. What a situation! Oh, and let's not forget the massive emigration of professionals, especially from the health sector. Who wouldn't want to migrate when the average salary is about $230 per month? Brain drain here is unstoppable. On the other hand, poverty is like an unwelcome guest that refuses to leave. Despite the wealth and resources, most jobs are informal, with low wages and working conditions that would make any labor inspector cry. But all this about abundant mineral resources and poverty doesn't add up, right? There's something fishy here. Number 7. Afghanistan's economy is as dry as its landscape, with a GDP per capita of just $505. Afghanistan is a country where reality surpasses any Hollywood script. Since 2020, its economy has decreased by 27%, as if it had been on an extreme diet. Speaking of diets, did you know that 69% of Afghans don't have enough resources for basic subsistence life? Women and girls continue to bear the brunt as their rights have been drastically eroded. And seeing this, the UN has spoken out saying that women's rights are key to economic recovery, which is true, but we already know how it goes with the UN. Afghanistan has serious internal conflicts, mainly stemming from its fight against the Taliban, who have left millions of girls and women out of the education system. But for the boys who can get high school and higher education, things don't seem to improve either. Many children are subjected to extreme physical punishments by their teachers. And let's not forget inflation, that economic roller coaster that goes up and down uncontrollably. In 2022, inflation reached its peak of 148.6, but by 2023, it turned into deflation, currently standing at around negative 10.2%. Number 6. Sierra Leone, a place where the economy is as changeable as the weather in the tropical jungle. To get an idea of the economic situation of this country, you just have to watch Blood Diamond or Lord of War. They're simply striking. With a GDP per capita of $477, this country teaches us a lesson in resilience mixed with a pinch of recession. In 2022, inflation averaged 27%, a huge jump from the 12% of the previous year. Despite the economic challenges, this country has an iron spirit. Projected economic growth is 4.7% in 2024, driven by agriculture, mining, and the recovery of services. Sierra Leone's economy has been hit by internal and external shocks, such as the depreciation of its currency and poorly adjusted fiscal policies. This has led to an increase in the cost of living and a severe crisis in people's ability to meet their basic needs. And if we talk about challenges, education and the quality of skills are key to improving the well-being of its population. With more investment in education, Sierra Leone could open the door to more formal opportunities and, thereby, reduce poverty. Number 5. At the heart of Africa lies the Democratic Republic of the Congo. With a GDP per capita of $470, this African giant is at a crossroads between its immense potential and enormous challenges. This country is truly rich in natural resources, yet it is one of the poorest countries in the world, paradoxically. Almost 62% of its inhabitants live on less than $2.15 a day. It has gold, diamonds, cobalt, and yet they struggle to make ends meet. We use our cell phones daily but are unaware that their functioning depends on the suffering of thousands of people who are exploited daily in the mines of this country. It turns out that here, those who become millionaires with natural resources are the mine overseers, the intermediaries, and finally, the tech companies that produce these cell phones, like Apple or Samsung, etc. This country has persistent conflicts, especially in the eastern region, and a humanitarian crisis that does not cease. In addition, inflation is rising at an accelerated pace. Lately, it's struggling to improve digital connectivity to create jobs and reduce poverty. A bet on the future amidst the turbulence of the present. Number 4. With a GDP per capita of $430, Mozambique faces waves of challenges, but it holds firm to the helm towards hope. Think of it this way. This country is dancing to the rhythm of an economic growth that rose from 2.3% to 3.8% in 2022, despite the headwinds of the pandemic and other conflicts. But the party gets complicated when inflation sneaks in like an unwelcome guest, jumping from 5.7% to 10.3%. And what does Mozambique do? It raises interest rates to curb that inflation, while keeping an eye on the growth horizon for 2024. Some would say it's an act of economic juggling, others a survival strategy. It seems Mozambique is starting to climb towards a perhaps hopeful future, but it starts from very low. Number 3. Malawi is a country with a GDP per capita of only $397. In Malawi, economic growth is like a plant struggling to bloom in arid soil. GDP is expected to grow by 3.5% this year, driven by agriculture, tourism, and exports. But Malawi faces very serious problems such as deforestation, lack of water, declining fisheries, government mismanagement of natural resources, and soil erosion. But how to prevent soil erosion when 80% of Malawi's population works in agriculture? Imagine a country where most people are literally cultivating their future with their own hands, and we can't blame them for this. They also deal with increasingly unpredictable weather. And in this scenario of challenges, Malawi is dancing to the tune of tight monetary policy and fiscal consolidation. The country navigates between the need to invest in its people and the reality of a tight budget. Number 2. On the second place of this unusual and unwanted podium, with a GDP per capita of just $322, is South Sudan. This young country presents us with a scenario that seems taken from a survival movie. South Sudan is like a tree in the middle of the desert, struggling to grow in soil shaken by conflicts and natural disasters. After all, the oil, its black gold, is trapped in a maze of floods and lack of investment. And not only that, here, economic figures pale in comparison to human stories. Over 9.4 million people need humanitarian assistance. Can you imagine almost the entire population living on the brink of need? South Sudan is a reminder that wealth underground doesn't always illuminate life on the surface. Number 1. Burundi is the poorest country in the world in 2024 and has been for many years. With a GDP per capita of just $267, this small country in the heart of Africa paints a picture of daily survival. 87% of the population lives on less than $1.90 a day, and subsistence agriculture is the norm for 80 to 90% of its inhabitants. But why is Burundi so poor? There are many reasons, but mainly due to civil wars, corruption of officials, poor access to education and health services, and generally weak infrastructure. Burundi is also densely populated. Let's just break it down. It's approximately 13 million inhabitants and its surface area is 10,747 square miles. This gives us an approximate of 1,251 people per square mile. And considering that the majority of the population is engaged in agriculture, this means great pressure on the soil. On the other hand, there's also the HIV problem due to the previously mentioned poor healthcare system. Cobalt and copper are its main natural resources, but we already know whose hands these resources will end up in, right? Hello, corrupt government. Hello, intermediaries and transnationals. On the other hand, it also exports sugar and coffee, but not as a transformed good. This is Burundi, and it'll continue to be because it's the world we live in. Increasingly unequal and desolate for those who manage to board the progress train. Well, this is the story of these countries, a sad but necessary ranking, necessary to know and see beyond our perspective. See you next time. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.